Hi friends, this is Judson here. I want to be able to share with you today's encouraging word, although here we go. We're in the book of John chapter 19, verses 1 to 11 is going to be our passage today. Jesus has been arrested. Jesus is now on trial. He is with Pilate. And Pilate has just tried to free Jesus by saying you can have Jesus or you can have Barabbas, who everyone knew was a common thief. And the people asked for Barabbas. And so here Pilate has a problem where, once again, Pilate is shown as being incredibly reluctant to do what the crowd and what the chief priests want them to do. They want him to be crucified. And Pilate is trying to find other solutions. And today's passage is all about Pilate trying to find another solution to something. Because when he questions Jesus and he talks to Jesus and he looks at him, he does not see someone that has done the sin that they are talking about. Done something so grave that it requires death, and that is where Pilate's at. In the Old Testament, in Isaiah chapter 53, I want to say it's off the top of my head, but in Isaiah 53, they're talking about the suffering servant. And the suffering servant is, Isaiah 53 is one of these passages we looked at on Good Friday. And it's a passage that we read in conjunction with this description of what Jesus went through during these last moments. A phrase comes up that is used in Isaiah 53 and it's used in other places, that he was despised and rejected by his own people. Jesus, we're going to see that Jesus being despised and rejected by his own people here in this story. So this story is difficult to read. It is very somber, but yet at the same time, Jesus is in control during this entire time. He knows what he's doing. He's doing this to be able to bring salvation for you and for me. We must always remind ourselves of that. John 19, verse 1 and following. Then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him. I'm going to stop there for a second. There is a debate, I would say, in regards to what type of flogging this is in John chapter 19. John is the only one that has this description here in this particular passage, in this particular story over here. Pilate is flogging Jesus. Now later on, after Pilate gives Jesus a death sentence, Jesus gets the full flogging. The scourging is what they called it back at that time. And that was a much more serious punishment. And that's, if you see the movie The Passion of the Christ, that's what happens there at that scene. If you see the movie The Passion of the Christ, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we all see movies or whatever. They show that what's happening in John 19 verse 1, happens beforehand. And that is probably not true. This is just Jesus being whipped. He's receiving, he's not receiving the cat o' nine tails at this time. He's just being whipped, which I know it sounds ridiculous to say that. He's just being whipped and caned and beaten at this time, but it is not the full. There's different types of punishment that they had in the ancient days. And so one was you got lashed a whole bunch of times and you walked away from that and said, boy, I never want to do that again. And there was, it hurt. It obviously left a massive scars and marks on your body. But for the most part, it wouldn't do permanent damage to you, okay? The scourging that happens before death, when a death sentence is given to someone. If someone is scourged, there is permanent physical damage that happens to that person. There is, that person they're never going to be the same ever again afterwards. And I'm sorry to be kind of gross or graphic or whatever, but because many of us have seen that movie and we've seen that scene, that movie places that scene here in John 19:1. But really, in the book of Matthew and Luke, if you look carefully, they have that happening after Jesus is ordered to be crucified. And at this point, Jesus has not been ordered to be crucified. And so there's probably a pre-whipping, a pre-beating, just kind of a punishment, if you will. And it was an appropriate punishment that happened to this person, and it was definitely quite a deterrent and such. And so it says, Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged, and the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and arrayed on him a purple robe. And they came up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and struck him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to them, "See, I'm bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no guilt in him." I'm going to stop there at verse 4. So Pilate has some stuff done to Jesus where, they're mocking him, they're doing all these various things, but they're doing all these things where they're mocking this idea that he's the king of the Jews, where Jesus really is the king of the Jews. But they're doing this to mock him, that he is the king of the Jews. But Pilate doesn't believe that Jesus is guilty. Because Pilate doesn't believe Jesus is guilty, he's looking for a way out still. He already tried bargaining once. Then he did these things to be able to show them, like, see, this is what we would do to kind of like a king of the Jews. And so in verse 4, he says, he reminds them, I just want you guys to know, I don't see any guilt in this man. Verse 5. So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, and Pilate said to him, "Behold the man." This is a very famous phrase. Many people have preached off of this phrase, and it is in a lot of ways. People are he's looking at, Jesus looks pretty sad and decrepit at this time. He's got this gaudy purple robe thing on that they're mocking him. He's got this crown of thorns on top of his head. They could see that he's been beaten, he's been mistreated, and he's like, look at the guy. I mean, look at him, and he's not going to be a danger anymore. He's not going to be a threat anymore. He is done. He's paid his time. He paid his time really for the crime that he has done. And Pilate is trying to placate the crowd here in regards to what he has done and said over here. And when the chief priests, verse 6, when the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him, crucify him." Pilate instead said to them, "Take him yourself and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." And Pilate's like, listen, I don't feel good about this because I don't find any guilt in him. If he found guilt in him, he'd have no problem doing it. Pilate's not squeamish. He just doesn't want to do injustice. He's got a sense of justice, like all of us have a sense of justice. He doesn't want to do an injustice over here. Jesus is clearly innocent. He hasn't done anything that is worthy of that crime. And Pilate recognizes the authority and the power that he has. Continuing on, verse 7, the Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law, he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God." And so here they're admitting that the real reason why they are bringing Jesus up on this trial. Jesus is claimed to be God. Jesus is claimed to be divine. Jesus is claiming to be a Messiah and all these various things, and because of that, they have to get rid of him. And when Pilate heard this, verse 8, when Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. He entered his headquarters again, and he said to Jesus, so now we get away from the crowds. Pilate hears this, and he is, the word people use today is triggered. He is triggered in regards to going like, what's going on here? Because Pilate recognizes something's going on over here. And in other stories, we know that he has some supernatural things going on around him where he realizes something supernatural is going on around him. And so they're saying, well, he's the Son of God. He's a divine being. And Pilate's taken back by that. And he's afraid because of that. Verse 9, he entered into the headquarters again, and he said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" Like, are you from heaven? Or are you from down the street? Continuing on, but Jesus gave him no answer. So here Jesus refuses to defend himself. And partially because Jesus knows he needs to go to the cross. He needs Pilate to do what Pilate's supposed to do. In verse 10, so Pilate said to him, you will not speak to me. Do you not know that I have authority to release you and the authority to crucify you? So Pilate's trying, he's like, I'm trying to help you out here, buddy. I can release you, but if you don't answer my questions, I can also kill you. And Pilate is feeling a sense of frustration and a sense of powerlessness. And Jesus comes back, and he wants to once again reiterate the power of God and the control that God has in this whole situation. Well, it looks like, Jesus isn't in a bind. Jesus wants us to be able to know he is in control of the situation, and he knows what he's doing. It says, Jesus answered him. He said, you would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, he who's delivered me over to you has the greater sin. Jesus says, Pilate, the reason why you have authority is because God gave you that authority. That's what we believe in regards to government. We pray for our government. We wish the best for our government. We hope our government leaves us at peace and is able to enable us to worship and gather together in peace. That is what we are to pray for and to be able to seek. Nothing wrong with kind of, rooting for our government to be able to do well and all those other various things. But the reason why we do those things is because God has given authority over to our government. And if we have good government, we can have good lives. And if we have bad government, it can really mess up and give us bad lives. And so we want to be able to have good government and whatnot. But God has given authority to those who are in charge. And God's in control of who wins various elections, who's put in charge of various areas and things. And so we need to be able to acknowledge and recognize that the Lord is in charge. And Jesus says, listen, the reason why you have authority to do what you're saying you have is because my Father has given that to you. But the greater sin is those who have rejected him, who have despised him, who've turned him over to be able to face this situation. And Jesus is acknowledging that there are some of the Jewish leaders that are outside at this particular time, yelling, shouting, trying to get Jesus to be crucified. They are the ones that are going to carry the greater blame for what's going to go on over here. And that is, sorry about that. And that's today's encouraging word. I hope you guys are able to find something encouraging out of this. I look forward to chatting with you guys later. Take care. Bye.